Hello monster theorists, welcome to the first ever wildcard guide. As you may know, in the last update, wildcards were made a lot easier to obtain, which means now we have a guide for it. We'll be talking about what wildcards even are, what they're used for, and the best ways to earn them. Let's get straight into it. What are wildcards? Wildcards are a rare currency that can be used to fill up slots in monsters that have inventories to be unlocked. For example, the Wublins take monster eggs zapped into their inventories to be woken up. The rare Wublins take rare monster eggs zapped into their inventories to be evolved. Woboxes need monsters zapped straight from the islands to wake up. Amber also requires eggs zapped into the monsters, and so do Celestials. Having a good source of wildcards will make these monsters so much easier to obtain. So how do you get a good source of wildcards? I'm glad you asked. There are three main methods of collecting wildcards. Method number one is the Nexus. Once you complete 8 collections of magical monsters, you can start collecting wildcards. However, this is a very rare chance, and I would not go for the Nexus specifically for wildcards. Method number two is early ascending a Celestial. If you have a young Celestial that you want to evolve into an adult Celestial, meaning that you need to zap eggs into it, but you don't have all of the eggs, you'll be able to spend keys to have a chance of being able to evolve it anyways. This can save time zapping monsters into the inventory, however, it's not a guaranteed success. And whenever it fails, it gives you a wildcard. This is an extremely difficult way to get wildcards, and I am extremely glad that the third method was added, which is the Minor Carnival. Basically, how it works is that the Minor Carnival monsters can produce wildcards. How do you get the Minor Carnival monsters? You can teleport Major and Minor Carnival monsters to the Carnival, or you can breed up monsters that are better at making wildcards on the Major form and then pair them to the Minor form using the Centrifuge. It's a whole process. I'm planning on making a guide for it at some point. Stay tuned. But the point is, this is the best source of wildcards by far. I have a feeling that the Nexus will be useful at some point once we get more epic monsters, but for now, I mean, there's no competition. If you want wildcards, get monsters on the Minor Carnival. And I mean, that's really all there is to it. But how many wildcards do you need to wake up monsters? Let's go over some numbers together. This is Editor Cobra, and I realized that almost as important as it is to know how many wildcards you need to wake stuff up, it's also important to know how many wildcards you're even gonna earn. So I wanted to share my experience with how many I've been earning over this last week. I have one of each of the paranormals linked to both the Major and the Minor Carnival. I do have one extra germ, but it hasn't produced anything yet. I just got it yesterday. But with one of each monster, I have gotten about 2 wildcards per day. That's about 14 a week. That's like 56 wildcards a month. So that's about 100 wildcards in 2 months. Not a bad rate. I think once we get more waves, things will start looking better. But just an interesting note, by far the most productive monster has been my germ. It has made about 1 wildcard for every monster I own so far. It is making wildcards significantly faster. And I don't know if this is just luck, but honestly, I feel like that's reason enough to get multiple germs. So that's what I've been doing. And yeah, that's my experience so far. Let's take a look at some numbers. For a common Wubox on a natural island, it costs 1 wildcard per monster. So if you wanted to wake up a Wubox from nothing just with wildcards, you would need 15 wildcards. The rare Wuboxes require 1 wildcard per element on a monster. So for example, if you have a single element, that's 1 wildcard. But if you have a triple element, that's 3 wildcards. If you wanted to wake up a natural rare Wubox from nothing to full, only using wildcards, that would cost 32 wildcards. Next, we have epic Wuboxes, and their natural forms cost 2 wildcards per element. So a Mammoth, 1 element, times 2 is 2 wildcards. A Shellbeat, 4 elements, times 2 is 8, so it would cost 8 wildcards. All of this would be from nothing to full, only using wildcards, 64 wildcards. I mean, surprisingly, that's not too bad. How about the fire monsters? Because the Oasis and Haven have it. Are the rules different? Yes. The common Wuboxes, they cost the same amounts for the natural monsters, but if a monster has a fire element, it costs 2 wildcards. As far as rares go, I cannot confirm it, but I have a feeling it's probably 2 wildcards per element, and I can't be sure about epics, but I would assume it's 4 wildcards per element. Remember, all of the natural monsters on the island are counted as normal. If you wanted to wake up an ethereal island epic Wubox, it would cost 100 wildcards, which is not a lot. But if you wanted to wake up a Wublin Island common Wubox, it would cost almost 300 wildcards. This has to be because it's filling with Wublins, and the Wublins are expensive, and there's a lot of them. Each Wublin costs 15 wildcards to replace into the Wubox. I do feel for MPG, who is saving for epic Wubox. Holy moly, that's gonna take forever. However, if you wanted to completely wake up a Gold Island Epic Wubbox, it would cost 150 wildcards, or 30 wildcards for each phase. Still kind of a high number, but lower than I expected for such a difficult to obtain monster. What about Wubblins? Common Wubblins take 1 wildcard per monster. Rare Wubblins take 1 wildcard per element. So if you were to zap in a Kongle, a triple element, it would take 3 wildcards. And the epic ones have some interesting rules because there are also some fire monsters mixed in. If you're replacing a natural, it's 2 wildcards per element. So if you had a Drumpler, it would cost 4 wildcards. But if it requires a fire monster, it requires 3 wildcards per element. So let's say you had a Flumox, a quad. 4 times 3 is 12. It would take 12 wildcards to put in an epic Flumox into an epic Wublin. Vessels and young Celestials also cost 1 wildcard per monster, but the adult Celestials have a little bit of a weirder rule. According to the Wikipedia, these are split up into 3 categories because you have the magical monsters, the natural monsters, the fire monsters, and the seasonal monsters that can be zapped into these adult Celestials. Once again, this is according to the wiki, and I have found a few inaccuracies, but according to the wiki, 1 wildcard per element for a magical monster, 1 wildcard for a natural or fire monster, 2 wildcards for a seasonal or mythical. When it comes to the rare flex eggs, it's a little bit trickier. According to the wiki, for a natural monster, it costs 1 wildcard per 100 diamonds it would take to spend to zap it in with diamonds on the Celestial. Oh, that was a mouthful. And fire monsters take 1.5 wildcards per 100 diamonds it would take to replace the monster with diamonds in the Celestial. So basically, if you only had the flex eggs left and a flex egg cost 100 diamonds, it would take 1 wildcard to replace it. If it cost 400 diamonds, 4 wildcards. But if it was a fire monster, then it costs 1.5 per 100. Anyways, that is basically it for wildcards. What do you guys think? I mean, I'm really excited about this new update, and I hope that this guide was useful or interesting to you. If it was, be sure to leave a like and maybe subscribe. I do a lot of update videos. Thank you to my lovely Cobra Clan for letting me drink soda while I edit these, and I will see you guys in the next video. Happy monstering.